This is Perspectivas Latinas, a community service of CAN TV. I'm your host, Juan Carlos Hernandez. Gun violence seems to have few remedies, but there are some people taking steps toward creating hope. Today we have Susan Johnson, the Executive Director of Chicago Citizens for Change. We also have Maria Pike Davis, an active member of the organization. And we have Mike Oquendo, a comedy producer and now a filmmaker. His film, For the Love of Mom, is about families touched by gun violence, which we will air after the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Well, obviously this is a very profound and hard issue to talk about, but it seems to be the national conversation, and especially with the focus here in our city. How does this film fit into that conversation, Mike?
Well, you know, the film was made not to highlight the gun problem or the gang problem or the violence problem, but to highlight this kind of push to the side thing that we don't want to talk about, which is the effects of family, the effects, what happens to mothers when their child has been injured or killed by gunfire. And for us, we wanted to do something, you know, and we were stuck between whether we were going to produce something on stage or do something relative to a theater performance. And we came together with the idea of doing the film because we wanted to capture the real emotion, what happens really to that mother. And most of the film talks about the day of the crime, the day that the incident occurred, or the day that the child died, and covers these mothers in detail, because when we see on TV most of the time, we're watching a mother leave an ER, we're watching a mother at a crime scene, we're watching a mother leave a wake. It's almost always mom, not to take away from the dads that are out there that are also impacted, but most of the time it's mom. And what we wanted to kind of do was to have a young person watching this film think, wow, this is what happens to my mom, or this is what I do to somebody else's mom.
Right, and often I think you use a very proper term, people are pushed aside, or we just see a news clip, and if we do see mom, it's very brief. There was a shooting here, there was a shooting on the south side, wherever the shooting takes place, so-and-so died, and it's a news clip for a day or two, and then it's gone. Susan, can you tell us about what happens to these families that are pushed aside?
Currently, what happens to those families is very little. They will not receive any immediate assistance, and that's how our organization came into being. Our founder, Joy McCormick, lost her son in 2009, and when she reached out to a number of organizations saying, help me, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to cope, I've never planned a funeral, these sorts of things, there was no one there to help her. And she swore it would never happen to anybody else. And so that's why Chicago Citizens for Change exists. And our program, Chicago Survivors, is a way for us to reach out to as many families as we can and make sure that they receive referrals and also support. I think our biggest movement right now is to create a community of survivors. There are practical resources that people need following the death, particularly of a child or a young person. But more than that, and for a longer period of time, they really want and need peer support. There is no one who can comfort someone who has been through this better than someone who has also been through it. And I've made those cold calls where I pick up the phone and I say, this is Susan Johnson, I'm calling with Chicago Citizens for Change. I understand that you've lost a family member and I'm deeply sorry. Would you like to speak to someone else who's been through this? And over the phone, I can hear the sigh, the relief, the tears, and then, yes, I need to talk to somebody. So we try to make that happen, and we make it happen both so that they receive immediate support, someone who really understands how they're feeling, what they're going through, can offer them even little practical tips on how to make it through a day. But also, and Maria's just back from Washington, D.C., we do it because we need a community of survivors whose public voice will be heard. Because Mike is right. You know, we've got, for every individual who is injured or killed in violence, we've got a family of 8, 9, 15 people who are also deeply impacted. Before we came on the air, we were saying together that there are whole communities who are just submerged under the effects of violence. And so creating that public voice is a really important part of starting to do violence prevention.
Sure, and we will definitely get to that public voice, but I'm curious about that first cold call, as you said, and then the steps you take from there of, I guess in a sense, counseling this person or this family and bringing them into this fold of survivors and in that process of healing. What happens after that cold call?
So at this point, we meet families at various points along the way. We're working toward a program where we work in such close collaboration with the police department that we really can reach out to families almost immediately. And that's our real hope, that people won't wallow in a kind of shock and dismay for any period of time without assistance. But we'll do very practical things, help with planning a funeral, help with contacting the school that the children in the family attend to make sure that for the time period they're going to be home, they can get homework, their teachers know where they are, that sort of thing. So very practical assistance. And then, as you say, counseling, just in an informal way, counseling. What we really want to say to people is, your response to this terrible tragedy is a normal response. You are not an abnormal person, no matter what the media may say, or even your own family members, or your friends, or the community. No matter what voices you're hearing tell you that you did something wrong, or your kid did something wrong, your response to this is normal, and we want to help you through that. We want you to be in charge of how you're treated. And this I say with all due respect, because a show like this is very important to us, but the media can really kind of buffet a family around after a loss like that, and they feel as though they lose control over the story. They feel as though they are manipulated by whatever the agenda is that day, that week, and later on they'll be left. And they'll be left to deal with the residual feelings, or the feelings of maybe having been used, or maybe not having been heard. Media is an important part of how we as a culture communicate with each other. But even more than that, later on the family feels like, where did everyone go? The funeral is over, where did everyone go? And that's where our community of survivors gets together every 6 or 8 weeks. We have dinners together, we dance. We play bingo. We also talk about serious subjects, but we're really there for each other. So
you step in when the spotlight is on this family, and you remain.
That's right.
And as you said, you become a public voice. Maria, could you tell us about that experience of being the public voice for these survivors, and your experience in Washington just recently?
Oh, it was an unforgettable experience. It was very draining because I am a witness and I am a victim. So we had 10 families dealing with the loss of their kids, and we met with Newtown Alliance. He extended their hands to us. They built a bridge, and basically we saw eye to eye that we were one and the same, that the pain was the same, that the loss was the same, that we wanted better for our surviving kids or our community. So we visited several lawmakers. The goal was to see 40 lawmakers. We were assigned 9. It was a very long day, but we feel it was productive because we want to change the image of Chicago. Chicago is not what people around the country think it is. There is crime. There is a lot of crime. It is not concentrated. There are certain areas that get more crime than others, and the reason, people always say, Illinois, they have very restrictive laws and it's not working. Well, what they forget is that the whole country is not united in terms of, gun control. And our borders are very porous.
Between states, right?
Between states, right. So the most gun-ridden area in Chicago is very close to Indiana. And guns can be acquired for $50, $100. And that's how much is the cost of a life in here. It's cheap. Right.
What I'm hearing from you is that, and our conversation prior to the show is that a community such as ours, Chicago, or others that experience these mass shootings, tend to be isolated and kind of pushed away, and saying you kind of bring that upon yourself, or there's this game of guilt thrown on, I guess, if I'm understanding correctly, on survivors or entire communities. How did you deal with that attitude when you were in
Well, you
Washington?
know, all we needed to do is basically tell our stories, and show that we are human beings, and we are rational beings, and we are intellectuals, and God has given us those skills, because we have the right to decide between life and death, and doing the right thing or the wrong thing. We have choices, and that really the issue of gun control is it covers all sorts of areas, and not only the mental illness issue, you know, but that good citizens and bad citizens, all of us are together in this. We cannot. We all belong in one block, and we have to grow. We have to be together. The NRA is very skillful at marketing and pressuring lawmakers. They're very efficient, but we have people on our side, and we know we're fighting the right fight. We know we have to be together, and then we are very hopeful, because, frankly, in our town, people tend to push us aside because they think, oh, well, this is a racial issue. It is not a racial issue. And we should not make the mistake of considering this a racial issue. It's a lot more complicated than that. We have to see each other, you know, confront each other, and realize, yes, we have to make changes. We're going to be, we cannot allow this kind of crime in the most developed country in the world. And we actually have more crime than 22 other developed countries combined.
Wow. And talking about numbers and comparisons, well, I think we all just learned that Chicago is the #1 murder city in our country, according to the number of murders. But statisticians or government bureaucrats, the way I see it, love to play with numbers, and they say, but we're still behind others as far as murder rate, right? How do you respond to that type of manipulation of numbers, Mike?
You know, it's interesting, right? Because right now what we're all talking about is things we don't want to, groups and numbers and things we don't want to be.
Right.
I mean, for example, I'm pretty sure that Chicago survivors would much rather assemble the largest group of bingo players, or the largest possible group of, you know, people who do yarn work, right? I mean, that's the number that's the largest, that would be a phenomenal group to really assemble.
Right.
To say that, you know, that your group is growing, I'm sure that Chicago survivors is obviously doing that for support reasons, but I'm sure that they'd rather have another group. I'd rather have made a funny film. We'd rather be the city with the most amount of greenery.
No one wants to join our group.
Right. These are groups, these are numbers, but it's interesting the way we've become callous, right? So a couple of weeks ago, I'm sorry, not a couple of weeks ago, yesterday, I referenced my numbers from a couple of weeks ago, which are numbers that, you know, are difficult numbers to hear. In the last 7 months, 10 kids under 8 have been injured or murdered by gunfire.
Wow.
Yesterday, somebody said to me, hold on a second, where'd you get the number? And I gave him the numbers, and I referenced the 3-year-old shot in the head over the weekend in Indiana. And the person said, now wait a minute, but that's not Chicago. As if it matters. As if, take that one away and bring us back to 9, because that extra one kind of puts us at 10, and that's a number that doesn't belong to Chicago. Okay, as if it matters, right?
Right.
So, you know, if I would have made a film, a 27-minute film, of every child killed from 2009 to today, it would take you 4 years to see every film.
Right.
4 years to see every film. Okay, at 27 minutes of film in a 24-hour day, it would take you 4 years to see a film. There are 1,900 moms with a story to tell, 1,900 parents with a story to tell, right? And again, I would rather do 1,900 comedy shows. I feel a responsibility as a business person or as a person that does shows. As you know, I have a captive audience. I entertain, and I'm not trying to impress you or the audience that's watching, but I entertain 2,000 to 3,000 people a month. Okay, I'd rather do that regularly than show this film once on this channel to your mass. That's really not the publicity I was looking for. Obviously, the content. Right,
definitely. And we're going to watch a short clip of this film. Tell us what experience, to introduce the film, this short clip, what actually made you sit down and think, I need to make a film on this?
Yeah, I mean, it was a frustration piece. It was a frustration piece. It was like, okay, what can I do? We're doing well with the shows. I've got this captive audience. And, you know, I'm a big fan of every, and I don't put myself at their category, but I'm a big fan of every famous person that has used the attention they're getting to do something more. You know, that's why I'm a big fan of Bono and Sean Penn and people like that who say, okay, now that you're watching, let me address this issue real quick that's happening in the world. You know, Richard Gere. And again, I'm not comparing myself to them, but as long as I've got this little bit of attention, let me use it to highlight this. So that's how really it came about. And the moms were told, I'm making a film, you're making a film, to tell your story, to see how we can touch people.
Okay, it's getting beyond the numbers and actually bringing it down to
bringing it down to one person. Again, many stories have come up, and the people who've called since the film has been made with stories. I got a phone call from a young lady, an email from a young lady who saw the film and said, you know, when I was a child, I was shot in the head. Today, I'm a grown woman with 3 children. I have a family. I have responsibilities. I have a career. And why haven't you told your story? And she said, I was meant to feel as if I deserved that somehow because of the community or because of my surroundings.
Okay, let's go to the film clip right now then.
My name is Myrna Roman. My son's name is Manuel Roman.
My name is Diana Aguilar, and my daughter's name is Aaliyah Shell.
Manny was a pretty boy, very athletic. He used to play a lot of sports. Since he was 6 years old, I always used to have him involved in floor hockey, football, basketball, whatever sport there was. I always made sure he'd stay busy. He was also a dancer. He used to dance with soneros that swing. He was a really good dancer, traveled to different parts of the States and in Puerto Rico, and used to perform in the Congress. And he was just always really a busy, pleasant, pretty boy.
Aaliyah was 6 years old. She went to José Ortiz de Dominguez Elementary School, and she was in kindergarten. She loved to color, dance. She was my Care Bear because she had big chubby cheeks, and my pumpkin.
Which paper? Okay, thanks for that short film clip. We will be showing, just to let our audience know, the entire film after the show. Tell us, Susan and Maria, how you became connected to Mike and this film and the importance of telling these stories.
Myrna and Diana are both members of our community of survivors, very active members of our community of survivors, very important to us. And they so appreciated Mike's frustration and outreach. You call it your frustration, we call it your compassion. That they really wanted us to come to the premiere to see it, to help spread the word about it. So we're just very proud of them. It is very hard, and Maria said this earlier, it's draining to tell your story. But every single family member that belongs to Chicago survivors thinks about the way that they want to use their story to better the community. It's almost the first thing that parents say as they emerge from the tragedy is, what can I do? How can I use this pain so that this doesn't happen to anyone else?
And what are some of the reactions you've gotten? You went to the premiere. How did the audience react?
It was very intense. There was, I think, a lot of the people who were there who had not experienced this were surprised, taken aback by how powerful the feelings were from the mothers. So it reached its goal. The goal was to make people understand that this is not my pain only. If it happens to you, this is what you should expect happen to yourself, to your family, to your friends, to the friends that surrounded the loved one.
You know, one of the things that I remember from the premiere is Mike saying how important it was to him to get it in a time frame and in a language and vernacular that young people would really respond to, that this was a film he made to be shown in schools and community centers across the city, and how important it is to create, again, that moral voice in the wider society that says this shouldn't be happening.
That's right.
Remember, you're a mother, someone else's family, and instead of getting wrapped up in the moment or getting pulled into a cycle of violence that existed even 3 generations before you came along, how do you pull yourself back out of that? And I think that's where we're really wrestling as a society, is how do we create, again, that broad moral voice that says this is not the way we want to live together. And where do we put the brakes in the middle of that cycle of violence and say we actually can live another way? And that, I think, is what was really released the night of the premiere.
Yeah, and a lot of people, it creates a lot of dialogue and it creates a lot of conversation, and
crucial to all of this.
Yeah, and and when I show it to young people, and there's that silence in the room that did not exist before I walked in, and when I show it to schools, and when and even people who show it when I'm not present say, interesting the way 700, 800 kids were in an auditorium, and for 27 minutes you could hear dust falling, because they are thinking. They are thinking. It's too cool, I understand it. Peer pressure to show emotion, I understand it. But they are thinking. They are thinking, and we don't. People have asked, well, do you expect to change the world with the film? Do you expect? No, we're just expecting people to take an extra second and think. We're hoping that a young person will take an extra moment and think. And if you're not the potential offender, that maybe you know the potential offender, that maybe you'll go back and tell your cousin, your brother, the guy on the corner, the guy you have access to, or in rare cases, or in some cases, the young lady who might be the potential offender, and say, hey, you know what, there's a different way, or think about what you're going to do next. We don't know.
Right. Take us through that journey, the final steps of making the film, the premiere, and what's happened with the film and what you hope to happen with this film now that it's out and people are watching it and talking about it.
Yeah, let's talk about the business end of it. There is no business end of it. The mothers and everybody involved in the film were promised, and that promise has been kept and will be kept, that at no time there would be no profit made from the film at all. We paid for the film, the 1,000 copies, $1.50 at a time, and the second 1,000 copies were paid for, believe it or not, by a dinner that I made. And luckily I didn't poison anybody, but I had a paella dinner at my house, and people, 40 concerned people, 30 concerned people came to my home. They paid $40, and the very next morning we had 1,000 more copies. We don't charge for the copies. $1.50 if you want to give it, fine. $1.50 goes towards putting another copy in the community. The maximum corporate donation we take, whether you're GE or Exelon or Target, the maximum corporate donation is $5. So there is no business end of it. It's 100% made with the idea of getting people with a little bit of power to show it in their communities. So when people have come forward and said, I've got a donation, or I've got a buddy who can do this, or I've got a buddy who can do that, the best buddy you have is the buddy that can assemble young people and show it to them. So the editors were paid because they had to be paid, and the duplicators were paid because they had to be paid. But everybody on the film was a volunteer, everybody. And I, love the fact that lawyers and judges have given $1.50, and dishwashers and tow truck drivers have given $1.50. But I also love the fact that 6- and 7-year-olds have sent $1.50 in an envelope with a letter and said, my school is dangerous, and hopefully I can get a copy to show it. And that's big. That's big. That's bigger than getting Exelon or any company to say, hey, here's money. And again, there are some great corporations in Chicago, like Exelon, like Allstate. They're doing great things. And they're doing things at another level in terms of giving money to the city, and that's great. But, somebody said to me, has the mayor seen it? Here's my answer to that. I'm not sure if they're trying to pick on the mayor with that question, but here's my answer to that. The mayor doesn't have access, I don't think, to young kids in his neighborhood that would come see it. I think the mayor knows about 9 Puerto Ricans, and I'm one of them. So unless he can assemble 1,000 people in Logan Square and Humboldt Park to see the film, or assemble 5,000 people in Roseland and Inglewood to see the film, the mayor would just be another person with the film. We wouldn't treat him any different than the 7-year-old who gave the $1.50. We want people to show the film in their communities and have dialogue about what's happening, have them talk. The other thing is that we continue to see at all these neighborhood meetings and neighborhood panel discussions, we continue to see these panel discussions loaded with degreed professionals in their 50s and 60s who don't live in these communities coming out to talk to these kids. We need to put kids on those panels from those communities, and we need to listen. And we need to listen.
That's a great point to end.
And we need to listen.
We're out of time. Thanks so much for the conversation, and hope to have you back again and continue this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Perspectivas Latinas is a community service of CAN TV. If your nonprofit organization would like to work with CAN TV, call 312-738-1400 and ask for nonprofit services. Tune into Perspectivas Latinas for local issues and concerns every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. on CAN TV 21. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. Thank you for joining us. And stay tuned for the short film, For the Love of Mom.